The house on Stillwater Lane had been vacant for years, a once charming Victorian structure left to rot on the outskirts of town. Ivy strangled the crumbling exterior, and shattered windows gave it the look of a corpse caught mid-scream. But to the Hastings family, it was a fresh start. Or so they thought. "We'll fix it up," Mark Hastings said with a hopeful grin as he pushed open the creaking front door. His wife, Rachel, followed behind, carrying a sleepy-eyed toddler, Lily. Their teenage son, Noah, trailed last, his eyes locked on the looming shadows cast by the decaying banister. Inside, the air was thick with age. Dust floated in heavy beams of afternoon light, and the scent of mildew clung to every surface. The wooden floors groaned beneath their feet like the house itself was protesting their arrival. Still, there was potential: spacious rooms, ornate moldings, a clawfoot tub in the upstairs bathroom that Rachel fell in love with instantly. It felt forgotten, but salvageable. In the attic, Mark found the box. It sat in a far corner beneath a stained sheet, covered in layers of dust. Curious, he pulled the cover off and coughed as a cloud enveloped him. Inside were old newspapers, brittle dolls, and a peculiar wooden case, latched and weathered, as if time had worked tirelessly to keep its contents hidden. "Check this out," he said, bringing it downstairs. Rachel frowned as he opened the case in the living room. Nestled in faded velvet was a doll unlike anything she'd seen. Porcelain skin cracked in places. A yellowing lace dress clung to its stiff frame. But the eyes, deep, black, glassy orbs, seemed to swallow light, to stare straight into the soul. "She's unsettling," Rachel muttered. Lily toddled over and reached for it. "No, honey," Rachel said quickly. But it was too late. Lily clutched the doll and smiled. Pretty. That night, the wind howled louder than usual. The windows rattled, though no storm was forecasted. The family tried to settle in. The house creaked and moaned, as old houses do, but there was something more. Something beneath the noise. Something listening. Rachel tucked Lily into bed, gently taking the doll from her arms and placing it on a nearby chair. As she turned off the light, the room was bathed in silence. But just as she stepped out, a faint creak came from behind her. She glanced back. The doll hadn't moved. But the chair it sat on, it was now angled ever so slightly toward the bed. Downstairs, Noah sat in the living room scrolling through his phone. He paused when the lamp beside him flickered. Then again. The power hadn't been unreliable since they arrived. He tapped the screen off and listened. The room was silent, the kind of silence that presses on your eardrums. No hum of appliances. No crickets from outside. Just nothing. Then came the whisper. At first, he thought it was the wind, but it was inside. Faint. A girl's voice. "Noah." He bolted up, spinning around. "Who's there?" Silence again. He crept toward the hallway, heart thudding. He stepped slowly, the old wood groaning under each footfall. From upstairs, the sound of a giggle. A child's giggle. Noah called out, "Lily." No response. Then the scream shattered the quiet. Rachel was already running when Noah reached the stairs. Lily's scream had frozen her blood. They rushed into her room. The lights flickered. Lily sat upright in bed, pointing at the chair. She was standing there, Lily cried. The doll was standing there. Rachel turned to the chair, empty. The doll now sat on the dresser. Mark arrived moments later, blaming it on nightmares, sleepwalking maybe. But Rachel knew something was wrong. Lily had never been prone to night terrors. And the look in her daughter's eyes, that wasn't fear from a dream. It was real. Later that night, after everyone had gone to bed, Rachel sat alone in the kitchen sipping tea, trying to calm her nerves. The silence was suffocating. No humming of the fridge. No wind now. Just the tick, tick, tick of the wall clock. Then it stopped. Tick. Nothing. Rachel looked up. The clock's second hand had frozen. She tapped her mug nervously. Then the scraping began. Faint at first. A wooden drag across the floor. Somewhere above her. The attic. She stood slowly, heart hammering, each step toward the stairs like walking into a grave. The house felt colder now. Not from the weather, but something else. Something ancient. Malicious. The attic door groaned open. She hesitated before pulling the string to light the room. Dim yellow light buzzed to life, casting long shadows across forgotten boxes and decaying furniture. And then she saw it. The doll. It sat in the center of the floor, facing her. She hadn't brought it there. As Rachel's breath caught in her throat, the light flickered, then went out. In the blackness, something moved. Not the doll. Something else. Something breathing. A cold whisper brushed her ear. She wants to play. Rachel screamed. And downstairs, in her bed, Lily smiled in her sleep. The doll was back in her arms. Morning sunlight filtered through the cracked blinds, casting pale stripes across Lily's bedroom. Rachel hadn't slept a minute after what she'd experienced in the attic. Her hand still trembled as she stared at the doll now clutched in her daughter's arms. She was in the attic, Rachel whispered to herself. I saw her, up there. But here Annabelle was, in Lily's bed again, as if nothing had happened. Her hands folded neatly in her lap. Her glass eyes locked forward. Motionless. Innocent. Rachel reached to remove the doll again, but Lily stirred and tightened her grip. She said you were scared of her, Lily mumbled sleepily. Rachel froze. Who said that, baby? The girl in the corner. Rachel turned, heart racing. There was no one in the corner. That afternoon, Mark chalked it up to exhaustion and nerves. It's a new house, Ratch. Creepy old houses make noises. You were probably just dreaming. I wasn't dreaming, she snapped. That thing, she moved. I saw her. Mark sighed and rubbed his eyes. Okay, then where's the evidence? She's just a doll. No, Rachel whispered, almost afraid to say it aloud. She's something else. In the days that followed, the silence in the house deepened. It wasn't natural, no bird songs outside, no rustling of trees. Even the wind, once a constant howl through the eaves, had stilled. The oppressive quiet made every footstep thunder, every creak shriek. Noah, ever the skeptic, began to notice things too. While working on a history paper late at night, he heard whispers, soft, indistinct, but just behind him. At first, he thought it was his headphones glitching. But when he turned, he saw a shadow dart across his room. He searched, heart pounding, but found nothing. Except, the doll. Sitting at the foot of his bed. He hadn't brought her there. He flinched back and cursed, grabbing it quickly to toss her into the hallway. But as his hand gripped her arm, he felt a pulse. A faint thrum, like a heartbeat. His breath caught in his throat. Then she blinked. He dropped her with a yell, stumbling back into his desk. She clattered to the floor, motionless again, her unblinking eyes staring straight ahead. Mom, he yelled. Mom. Something's wrong with this thing. Rachel ran upstairs, already on edge from days of tension. When she saw Annabelle on the floor, she grabbed her daughter and Noah, and shoved the doll into a closet, slamming it shut and turning the lock. That night, they heard scratching. Soft at first. Then louder. Rhythmic. Coming from the locked closet. Something was trying to get out. Rachel stood outside the door with Mark, the two frozen in fear. Mark held a baseball bat, Rachel clutched a crucifix she hadn't held in years. Then it stopped. Silence returned, deeper than before. Thick. Smothering. When Mark finally worked up the courage to open the door, the doll was gone. In her place was a crude message, etched into the inside of the wood. She never left. The next day, they called a priest. Father Mallory was a calm, aging man with weary eyes. He'd seen strange things before, but this house unsettled him immediately. When he stepped inside, he stopped cold. "Where is the object?" he asked. Rachel led him to the spot where the doll had last appeared. But there was nothing there now. "She comes and goes," Rachel said. "She's toying with us." The priest took out a vial of holy water and began walking the house, murmuring prayers in Latin. As he passed the hallway where Lily's toys were kept, he paused. The air shifted. Suddenly, Lily's jack-in-the-box wound itself up, slowly, creaking with each turn. Pop goes the weasel. The top burst open. But no clown popped out. Instead, a thin stream of black smoke drifted up and twisted into a face, sunken eyes, an open mouth, screaming silently. The lights burst. Father Mallory stepped back, flinging holy water toward it. The smoke recoiled with an unearthly shriek, and vanished. "Whatever this is," he said, voice shaking, "it's far worse than a haunting. You didn't just bring a cursed object into your home, you brought an anchor. A conduit." "Conduit to what?" Rachel asked. He turned toward her, eyes hollow. "To something demonic." That night, Father Mallory insisted they burn the doll, if they could find it. As the family searched the house, Rachel entered the basement, flashlight trembling in her hand. The air was colder here, wet and stagnant like a tomb. Cobwebs hung from the low ceiling. The bulb overhead flickered, barely illuminating the shadows. And there she was. Sitting in a wooden rocking chair in the center of the room. Annabelle. Motionless. Watching. Rachel stepped forward, cross in one hand, flashlight in the other. As she drew near, the light sputtered and went out. Darkness swallowed her. Then, a breath, behind her. A whisper. "She's mine now." Rachel turned, screaming. But there was no one there. When she turned back, the doll was gone. But Lily's voice echoed from upstairs, thin and distant. She said I can stay with her forever. Rachel ran, her footsteps thunderous in the silence. Upstairs, Lily's door creaked open on its own. Inside, the room was empty. The window was open. And the doll sat on the windowsill. Alone. Smiling. The police were no help. They wrote Lily's disappearance off as a runaway case. The open window, the lack of struggle, it all seemed too neat. But Rachel knew the truth. Annabelle had taken her. The priest, the doll, the haunting, it was all connected, and the evil was escalating. Mark paced the kitchen, face pale with rage and fear. "She's gone, Rachel. She's gone. What the hell are we supposed to do now?" Rachel sat at the table, staring at the doll, which had returned to its spot on the windowsill as if it had never moved. Her eyes were sunken from lack of sleep. "We find her. We find out what that thing wants." Father Mallory returned that evening, visibly shaken. "I contacted the church's archives," he said. "And I spoke with someone who's dealt with Annabelle before." He laid a dusty black folder on the table and opened it. Newspaper clippings, faded photos, and ancient Latin texts filled the pages. At the center was an old photo of the doll. Same dress. Same dead-eyed stare. "She is a vessel," Mallory explained. "Not just a haunted object, but a lure. She draws spirits, especially children. The demon attached to her is called Ramiel, a fallen watcher. He feeds on innocence, on trust. Once invited in, he takes root." Rachel's breath caught in her throat. Then Lily. She may not be fully taken, Mallory interrupted. But the longer she stays, the harder it will be to pull her back. The air in the room shifted suddenly. A deep, cold pressure sank over them. Then came the sound, a quiet giggle from upstairs. "Lily?" Mark whispered. They bolted from the kitchen, up the stairs, following the sound into the bathroom. The mirror was fogged, as if someone had taken a shower, though no one had used it. Slowly, the fog cleared, revealing words traced into the glass from the inside. "I'm still here." And below it, a child's handprint. The lights flickered. A sharp bang echoed from inside the bathroom cabinet. Rachel moved slowly toward the mirror, her eyes scanning the room. Then, as she leaned closer, her own reflection didn't follow. Her real body froze in place, but the reflection turned its head, stared at her, smiled. And in the mirror's surface, behind her reflection, stood Lily, eyes glassy, skin pale, clutching Annabelle in her arms. Rachel screamed and stumbled back. The mirror shattered. Mark grabbed her. "We have to end this. Now." That night, they brought the doll to the basement. They created a salt circle, just as Mallory instructed. He lit a row of white candles, each one flickering weakly in the thick air. The priest began to chant, sprinkling holy water over the doll. But Annabelle smiled. A low, guttural moan reverberated through the house. The walls trembled. Upstairs, doors slammed in rapid succession. Something unseen ran across the ceiling. Then, one of the candles blew out on its own. "No," Mallory whispered. "She's resisting." Suddenly, Rachel's eyes rolled back and she dropped to her knees. Her body convulsed violently. Her mouth opened, but it was not her voice that came out. "She belongs to me now." Mallory grabbed the crucifix and pressed it to her forehead. Steam hissed from her skin. Rachel let out a terrible, inhuman wail and collapsed. The salt circle blew apart. The doll levitated, spinning slowly in the air. All of the lights went out. In the pitch darkness, they heard it, small, bare footsteps padding around them. Then Lily's voice, soft and mechanical, as if coming from a broken speaker. "Play with me." Mallory flung holy water at the doll, screaming the Lord's Prayer. The doll exploded into flames, but the fire didn't spread. It hovered, suspended, flickering in the air like a living thing. Rachel sat up, gasping. "She's in the mirror world," she choked out. "Lily's trapped there. I saw her. She's trying to reach me." Mallory's eyes narrowed. "Then we need to go deeper. To the source." Mark looked between them, his hands shaking. "You're talking about entering that realm? That place?" Mallory nodded solemnly. "The mirror is the gateway. It's where the spirit hides. If we can find her there, we might be able to bring her back." They reconvened upstairs in the bathroom. Mark had replaced the shattered mirror with a tall, antique one found in the attic, iron-framed and speckled with black age marks. Mallory blessed it and began the rite. The mirror fogged again. Rachel stepped forward. Lily's reflection appeared once more, alone in a long, dark corridor lined with mirrors. She stood barefoot, the doll's head resting on her shoulder. Her lips moved silently. Then, a hand emerged from the darkness behind her. Not a child's hand. Long twisted. Blackened like ash. It gripped Lily's shoulder, and smiled through the mirror. Rachel screamed and slammed her hands on the glass, but it rippled like water. She fell through, vanishing. Mark yelled, reaching after her, but the surface hardened instantly. Solid. Cold. Mallory held him back. She made the choice. We must finish the ritual from here. She only has one chance to bring Lily out. If she fails... He looked at Mark gravely. She may never return. Inside the mirror, Rachel stumbled into cold, endless dark. The hallway stretched on forever, lined with mirrors reflecting twisted versions of herself, smiling, crying, screaming. The air was thick with whispers. And down the hall stood Annabelle. And beside her, Lily. Eyes black as coal. Rachel's breath crystallized in the cold as she took a step forward. The corridor was narrow, the floor a checkerboard of black and white tile that stretched endlessly. Every wall was lined with tall mirrors, each one reflecting not the reality she stood in, but a distorted, nightmarish version of herself. Some mirrors showed her sobbing, others laughing maniacally, and in a few, she was dead, hanged, burned, or torn apart by something unseen. She kept moving. "Lily," she called out. The sound of her voice was absorbed by the heavy air. It was like speaking underwater, dull and muffled. A faint giggle echoed in the distance. Then she saw her. At the end of the hall stood Lily, clutching Annabelle in her arms. Her skin was pale, her dress stained and torn. Behind her, the shadows rippled as if something massive moved just out of sight. "Lily!" Rachel cried, running toward her. But with each step, the hallway stretched further, as if it were alive and taunting her. The lights above flickered. Then she heard it, footsteps behind her. Heavy. Dragging. Something was following. Rachel spun around. A tall figure stood at the far end of the hall. It wore a long, black cloak, its face hidden beneath a cracked porcelain mask that mimicked a child's smile. Long, emaciated fingers gripped a strand of black hair, Lily's. Rachel turned and ran. She sprinted through the twisting corridor, mirrors flashing with horrifying images, her family dead, her daughter screaming, Annabelle laughing in the flames. The reflections reached for her, arms pressing out from the glass, nails scraping, trying to pull her in. She burst into a chamber. The room was circular, and the walls were nothing but mirrors, endless layers of reflection spiraling toward the center. There, on a stone pedestal, sat Annabelle, motionless. And beside her stood Lily. "Sweetheart," Rachel stepped forward, trying to keep her voice calm. "It's Mommy. I'm here." Lily turned. Her eyes were no longer black. They shimmered with fear, confusion. "Mommy," she whispered. "Yes, baby. I've come to bring you home." Annabelle's head snapped toward Rachel. The doll's eyes widened, its mouth curling into a smile that split through its porcelain cheek, revealing jagged, blood-soaked teeth beneath. The room shook. The mirrored walls screamed. The cloaked figure reappeared behind Lily, its mask cracking open like a shell. Beneath it was no face, only a void filled with writhing black tongues and burning eyes. Rachel lunged forward and grabbed Lily's hand. The girl trembled in her arms. The entity roared. From the pedestal, Annabelle levitated, her eyes glowing, her limbs twitching like a puppet on strings. The mirrors around them shattered one by one, each explosion releasing a deafening shriek. Wind howled through the broken realm. "You don't belong here." Rachel screamed. "She's mine. You can't have her." The air rippled. A voice hissed through the space. Not from the entity, not from the doll. But from everywhere. "But she invited me." Lily looked up at Rachel, tears in her eyes. "I didn't mean to. I was lonely." Rachel held her tighter. "You're not alone. You never were." A hand grabbed her ankle. She looked down, her own reflection from the broken mirror beneath her was clawing its way out, its eyes wild, its face twisted in rage. "You brought her here," the reflection shrieked. "You left the door open." Rachel stomped down on it, the reflection bursting into black smoke. She turned and ran, dragging Lily through the chaos. The floor cracked beneath them, threatening to collapse. The cloaked entity screamed in fury and gave chase, its body stretching unnaturally, limbs elongating like shadows. Ahead, through the shards of mirrors, Rachel saw the faint glow of candlelight, the real world. "Hold on," she yelled, lifting Lily in her arms and leaping forward just as the floor gave way. They crashed through the final mirror and landed in the bathroom. Mark caught them, sobbing with relief. Father Mallory stood beside him, holding the crucifix high. The mirror behind them shattered violently, releasing a burst of dark smoke that dissipated into the air. Annabelle lay motionless in the center of the salt circle. Rachel and Lily were safe. For now. Mallory wasted no time. He began sealing rituals around the doll, whispering Latin verses, placing her in a reinforced glass case lined with symbols and relics. Mark held Lily in his arms. "It's over," he whispered. But Rachel wasn't so sure. Later that night, as they all tried to rest, Rachel sat alone, staring at the doll now sealed in the case. Annabelle's eyes stared back. Then, barely perceptible, the glass fogged up from the inside. One word appeared, traced by something unseen. Again. The house had never been quiet like this before. Not in a peaceful way, but in a stifling, unnatural stillness. Every creak of the old walls now sounded like a scream waiting to happen. The mirrors were covered. The lights remained on at all times. And Annabelle sat motionless in her new prison, an iron-reinforced glass case surrounded by holy symbols etched in silver, blessed by Father Mallory himself. But Rachel knew. It wasn't over. She watched Lily sleep on the living room couch, afraid to leave her daughter alone even for a second. Since they had escaped the mirror realm, Lily had barely spoken. Her once lively eyes were sunken, distant. She didn't respond to her favorite stories. She didn't even flinch when the TV turned on by itself or when the kitchen faucet spewed blood-red water before returning to normal. Mark sat at the dining table, flipping through the Warren family's archived journals, pages Father Mallory had managed to retrieve through old Vatican contacts. The records detailed Annabelle's past, the cult rituals, the original possession, the many lives the doll had infected. But there was one phrase that repeated through the texts like a curse. The doll is not possessed, it is a conduit. A conduit for what? Mark asked aloud. Father Mallory looked up, pale and weary. For something far older than any demon we've named. Rachel felt the weight of his words crush her chest. Then what do we do? The priest hesitated. The Warrens never found a way to destroy her. Only to contain her. But now, she's changed. She's stronger. Rachel stood and walked over to the glass case. Annabelle hadn't moved, but her cracked porcelain face now bore a single line down her cheek, like a smile being cut into place. Rachel's reflection in the glass was wrong again. It smiled when she didn't. Suddenly, Lily began to scream. Rachel ran to her, finding her daughter convulsing on the couch, limbs thrashing violently. Her eyes rolled back as her mouth opened wider than any human's should, stretching and tearing the corners of her lips. Mark grabbed her shoulders, trying to hold her still. "Lily! Wake up! Come back!" Rachel wept as Father Mallory began to pray over her, the crucifix shaking in his hand. "Dominus vobiscum, exorcizo te, omnis spiritus imund." Lily's body arched backward, and then, silence. She opened her eyes. But it wasn't Lily anymore. A low, gravelly voice slithered from her mouth, "You locked her away, and left me behind." Father Mallory's crucifix burst into flame. He dropped it, hands blistering. Rachel screamed, stepping back as Lily floated several inches off the couch. Blood dripped from her nose and ears. The temperature dropped. Frost formed on the windows despite the heater blowing at full strength. "Mommy," the voice mocked from Lily's throat. "You're not going to save her this time." Then Lily's body fell limply into Rachel's arms, her breathing shallow but steady. Whatever had spoken through her had vanished, for now. Father Mallory knelt, sweat pouring from his brow. It's begun. Annabelle's no longer acting through illusions. She's anchoring the entity. She's possessed Lily? Mark asked in horror. The priest shook his head. No. Something worse. Annabelle's inviting something through Lily. Rachel's grip on her daughter tightened. What do we do? Father Mallory stood slowly. We finish what the Warrens couldn't. We sever the tether. We break the bond between Annabelle and the spirit that clings to her. But we'll need to go back. Back where? Rachel asked. To the mirror realm. Mark's face went pale. No. No way. We almost lost them both in there. We have no choice, the priest said. That realm is not just an illusion. It's a prison built by centuries of suffering. If we can locate the source of the bond, what the demon is truly anchored to, we may be able to trap it. Rachel looked at Lily, then at Annabelle, and finally nodded. I'll do it. That night, as thunder cracked outside and shadows writhed unnaturally on the walls, Rachel, Father Mallory, and Mark prepared the ritual. Salt was poured in a perfect circle, mirrors placed in specific angles around Annabelle's case, each engraved with ancient symbols. Lily lay in the center, unconscious but breathing. The priest began chanting. The air grew heavy. The mirrors started to fog. And Rachel's ears filled with whispers, thousands of voices speaking in reverse, overlapping like static. Then it happened. All the mirrors turned black. And Rachel was pulled in. She landed hard on a blackened marble floor. A hallway stretched ahead, long, pulsating with an unholy light. Blood dripped from the ceiling. And at the far end stood Annabelle, not in her doll form, but as a twisted, human-sized marionette. Its joints cracked as it stepped forward, head twitching, eyes glowing red. Behind it stood the true form of the demon. Towering, winged, its face a void of screaming mouths. It saw her. And it smiled. Rachel knew, the real battle had just begun. Rachel stood frozen, her breath catching in her throat as the demon loomed before her. The entity towered in the distance, yet its presence pressed against her skin like boiling oil. The black void that formed its face twisted constantly, a pit of open mouths whispering every fear she had ever known. At its feet sat Annabelle, still the doll, still watching, her eyes a gateway to something far worse. The air was thick and pulsing. Shadows moved with sentience, skittering across the walls like insects made of smoke. The corridor behind Rachel had vanished. There was no going back. She stepped forward, heart thudding against her ribs. "You took my daughter," she whispered. "But I'm not afraid of you." A rumble shook the realm. Laughter. 1,000 voices at once, some human, some not. The marionette-like form of Annabelle jerked to its feet, towering over Rachel now, with joints that bent the wrong way and glass eyes that seemed to blink. "You invited me in," it rasped. "You unlocked the door." Rachel held her ground. "Where is Lily?" The doll's lips cracked open. "She's inside. Just like the others. Just like you will be." Before Rachel could react, the realm began to shift around her. The hallway dissolved into a sprawling cathedral of horrors, pillars made of bones, chandeliers of broken dolls and teeth, walls that wept blood. The floor beneath her feet rippled like liquid glass, reflecting memories not her own. One such image surfaced, a nursery, old, decayed, where a woman screamed while clutching a baby. Shadows closed in, and the woman begged the doll on the shelf to stop. The doll turned its head. The baby went silent. Rachel staggered back as the vision faded. Father Mallory's voice echoed distantly. The ritual was still active, tethering her to the real world. She had limited time. Somewhere deeper in this place, the tether between Annabelle and the demon existed, and she had to find it and sever it. But every step forward made the realm grow more hostile. The cathedral stretched longer, the air harder to breathe. Annabelle's doll form reappeared ahead, standing in front of a door marked with the same sigil found on the Warren files, a binding rune, incomplete. Rachel reached for the doorknob. Pain shot through her fingers. The door hissed like it was alive, rejecting her. Blood smeared the handle as her palm split open. "Only the broken may enter," the doll hissed. Rachel clenched her jaw. "Then break me." She pressed her hand back onto the door, forcing it to turn. A shriek erupted from the walls themselves, but the door opened. She stepped through into a circular chamber of mirrors. Each mirror reflected not Rachel, but distorted versions of Lily. Some smiled sweetly. Others wept. One was drenched in blood. Another had black eyes and a slit mouth whispering, "Help me." At the center of the chamber was a pedestal. Upon it, a torn, rotting child's dress, Lily's. And beside it, a relic. A strand of hair wrapped around a rusted bell. The same bell the original cultists used in the ritual that bound the demon to Annabelle decades ago. Rachel reached for it. Suddenly, the demon appeared behind her, no warning, no footsteps, only cold. The mirrors shattered one by one, each breaking with a soul-shaking scream. The room shook violently as the demon's mouth opened wide enough to swallow her whole. "You cannot destroy what was invited freely," it roared. Rachel clutched the bell in one hand, Lily's dress in the other. "Then I'll return what you stole." She rang the bell. Reality ruptured. The sound was unlike anything she had heard, pure, ancient, and painful. The walls cracked, the realm shuddered, and Annabelle's form screamed in agony. Blood poured from the pedestal. Rachel dropped to her knees as the force of the sound tore through the chamber. Then, light. A sudden, blinding burst of white light engulfed the realm. Father Mallory's voice broke through like thunder. "Rachel. Find the tether and break it." Rachel opened her eyes in time to see the last mirror still intact, showing a version of Lily curled in a fetal position, weeping. A thread of red light extended from her chest to Annabelle, who was now nailed to the far wall, thrashing, her painted smile cracked wide open. Rachel ran to the mirror and plunged her hand into the glass. She screamed. It was like touching fire and ice and rot all at once. Her arm burned, but she grabbed Lily's reflection by the hand, yanking hard. The tether strained. The demon roared. The room began collapsing in on itself. Rachel screamed louder, pulling harder, until... snap! The tether broke. The reflection shattered. And Rachel fell into darkness. When she opened her eyes again, she was back. The mirrors around her were shattered. Father Mallory and Mark were kneeling beside Lily, who had begun to stir, her eyes slowly blinking open, clear, alive. Rachel sobbed and rushed to her daughter. Behind them, the case that held Annabelle exploded into shards. But the doll was gone. The house was unnaturally quiet. The ritual had ended, the mirror realm collapsed, and Lily was safe, for now. But silence had a weight to it now, one that pressed into every corner of the Holloway home like a bad memory that refused to fade. Rachel sat in Lily's room, watching her daughter sleep. Her breathing was steady, her expression peaceful. But Rachel couldn't relax. Not completely. Not while the chair in the corner, the one where she'd first seen Annabelle, remained empty but wrong, as if something had only stepped away for a moment. Mark stood by the door, arms crossed, his eyes scanning the shadows. "We need to burn the house," he said finally. Rachel looked up at him, her voice hollow. "And what if it's not in the house anymore?" Downstairs, Father Mallory worked quickly, gathering what remained of the ritual components. Salt lines had been redrawn. Holy water blessed and sprinkled. Candles burned low, their wax pooling in shapes that reminded Rachel of runes she never wanted to see again. He turned to them with solemn eyes. The tethers severed. You saved your daughter. But this evil, it isn't bound to the house. It was bound to her. He looked toward the shattered case that once held Annabelle. And she's not destroyed. Mark frowned. What do you mean, she's not destroyed? The doll disintegrated. Disappeared, Mallory corrected. It's different. Evil like that doesn't vanish. It hides. Waits. Rachel closed her eyes. Then we didn't finish it. No, Mallory said. But you survived it. That matters. Later that night, after the priest had left and Lily was tucked safely between her parents, the three of them slept for the first time in days. The storm had passed. Or so they thought. 1 week later. The Holloways had moved. Packed up what they could and fled the house with trembling hands and shallow breaths. The new home was modest, in a new town, with bright sunlight pouring in through large windows. A new beginning. Lily laughed again. Played with toys. Drew pictures. The dark ring under Rachel's eyes faded, and Mark's shoulders eased for the first time since the nightmare began. But the silence remained. And with it, the fear of hearing something, anything, that didn't belong. That night, Rachel walked past Lily's room. Her daughter was whispering. She froze. Rachel leaned close to the door, hearing the unmistakable murmur of a child having a one-sided conversation. Who are you talking to, honey? She asked gently, stepping inside. Lily looked up, wide-eyed. My friend. Rachel's stomach twisted. What friend? Lily pointed to the closet. She says she missed me. Rachel stepped forward, slowly opening the closet door. Nothing. Just clothes, toys, and... Her blood froze. A tiny strand of red thread. Exactly like the one that tied Lily to Annabelle in the demon's realm. Rachel snatched it up and backed away. Lily, she said quietly, I need you to tell me exactly what she looks like. Lily hesitated, then drew on her sketch pad. When she turned it around, Rachel dropped it. It was Annabelle. Sitting. Smiling. 3 days later. They called Father Mallory again. He arrived with urgency, visibly shaken by the reappearance. I told you it wouldn't end with the house, he said, gripping his cross tightly. He held Lily's drawing with gloved hands, turning it over to reveal a smear of ink that hadn't been there before, an inscription etched faintly, "Let me in." That night, they performed a binding rite over Lily's room, sealing every mirror, window, and creaking board. But the knocks began. Always 3. Soft, deliberate. From inside the walls. Sometimes from under the bed. Once, from inside a sealed toy chest. They tore the house apart. No doll. No sign. But the feeling never left. Rachel began waking up at exactly 3:06 a.m. every night. The minute the original ritual failed. Each time, she heard it. Knock. 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 Then silence. Until one night. The final night. The clock ticked to 3:06. Rachel sat upright, drenched in sweat. The house was quiet, too quiet. She reached for Mark. He wasn't beside her. Panicking, she ran to Lily's room. Empty. A whisper trickled down the hall. She's mine. Rachel followed the sound, descending the stairs barefoot, trembling. The front door was ajar. On the porch sat Annabelle. Not broken. Not decayed. Pristine. Like she'd never been touched. And in her lap, Lily's favorite stuffed bear. Rachel screamed and lunged forward. But the doll vanished. So did the bear. Mark appeared behind her, clutching Lily. She was standing in the middle of the road, he said, pale. Like she was sleepwalking. Rachel held them both, heart pounding. Far down the street, under the flickering light of a street lamp, the doll stood once more. Watching. Then the light blinked out. And she was gone. 1 year later. The Holloways relocated overseas. Changed their names. Started therapy. Destroyed every toy, every old drawing, every childhood trinket that could remotely resemble a doll. But the silence never left. Nor did the feeling that something was always a step behind. Somewhere, Annabelle waits. Not locked away. Not defeated. Just silent. And when she returns, there will be no warning. Just a knock. Then another. Then darkness. The end.